Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy, and in this podcast, Blake and I are going to talk about the biggest hot shots and have-nots of the last couple of weeks. Let's get Now, of course, I have your friend and my best friend, Blake Creamer, here with me. Blake, how are we feeling tonight?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit salty. I don't know. We were talking offline. I mean, Sundays they're boom or bust for me, depending on how my fantasy teams are doing. And I've got two outcomes here hanging in the balance of this Leafs and Detroit game. So I'm a little squirrely, my man. I need some points, and I need them now. All right, I got a reputation to uphold. But other than that, it was a pretty nice weekend. Nice weekend with the kids. You know, it was a little busier than I wanted actually. I'm kind of one of those parents that likes to turn the TV on, as I call it, the babysitter. You know what I'm talking about? That's not true. But anyways, it was a good weekend. How about you, buddy? How was your weekend?
Pretty solid. Yeah, we got major snow here, wind all weekend, so I was shoveling a ton. Between Friday night playing hockey, then I wake up Saturday morning and I'm shoveling for the first couple hours of the morning. Got my oldest out there with me to pass some time too, but then we went and we did a public skate, me and
Okay.
her, around noon. And then I had to shovel again by nightfall. So yeah, I think I got more physical exercise in that like 24-hour span than I have in probably like 3 years or something. I don't know. I'm feeling it today. I'm getting old, Blake. I don't know if you can relate to this.
Dude, I'm so with you. We have skating lessons for my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old on Sundays. So I did that this morning. And even just getting up and down on the skates and like over and over, like, first off, my knees were trashed. Like, it felt like they were filling with fluid the entire time. And then, it's not like my daughter loves it. Like, I'm with her. She's like, yeah, I want to go home. I'm like, this is fun. Let's learn how to skate. So, I'm trying to keep a good attitude, but damn. Yeah, we're definitely getting old, myself more than yourself. All right. I don't want to hear it, Nate. All right. You're a young man in the prime of your life. What are you doing?
I'll try to keep that in mind
Yeah,
next
that's
time.
right. Come on.
All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it with some newsies. Patrick Kane injured in the game here tonight and will not return, so we'll have to wait word on that. Jake Wallman also missed this game as well. Wasn't disclosed what that injury exactly was, as far as we know, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Detroit does have a pretty solid schedule for this week. Towards the end of the week, they got a bunch of off nights, so it would be nice to have these guys in your lineups and playing on those off nights for you. Jack Eichel is placed on IR, so he'll miss the next 2 games at least. Again, undisclosed here, but it looks like they're just trying to obviously free up some space there with the IR move, but it'll be at least 2 games here, and then we'll have to see from there. Not great news for the Eichel managers for sure. Alex Ovechkin missed both games of the back-to-back this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, so we got to keep an eye on that. It's a lower body injury going back to January 5th, where he had a collision with another player. He is traveling with the team. It does seem like it's more just like a nick than a long-term thing for sure, but they decided it would be best to keep him out of both these games and then kind of take it from there. Capo Caco returned from a 21-game absence and landed on the top line. And in true Capo Caco form, he did absolutely nothing with that deployment. Andrei Burakovsky was injured in Seattle's last game. No update there yet. Kirill Kaprizov is back. That's good news, but apparently it doesn't matter to the Wild. They got absolutely thrashed in that game. Shut out by one Connor Ingram, who you might know as a terrific zero-G option this year. Valery Nichushkin missed Saturday's game here with an illness against the Leafs, so we have to check on that one. Probably good to go, but you do want to double check as they're coming back on the Monday here. And then you also got to watch out for Arturi Lehkonen, close to returning as well. Last off, Linus Allmark traveling with the team. Apparently, Tess came back with good news, so should get into some game action hopefully this upcoming week, but obviously we're going to have to watch the reports. Kind of an ongoing theme with all of these here for this one. Anything stick out to you from the list here, Blake?
No, it's the no update. All right, and we're here for
Yeah.
it, so that feels good.
All right. Well, let's continue on then, and we'll get into some hot shots. And we'll kick it over to you, Blake, right away with your hometown favorite there in Elias Pettersson. Tell me what's been going on with him.
Well, first off, can I get a heck yeah? All right, that's Nate. Yeah, that's fine. We'll edit that in post. Buddy, they're flying right now. It's crazy, but I mean, I love the Canucks. They're number one in the league. Obviously, I'm a Canucks fan, but this makes no sense. None of this makes any sense. Their PDO is ridiculous on the season. They're overachieving on their offense. They're overachieving on their defense. Their goaltender is overachieving. It's just been a great season so far. As bad as last season was, this season is as good as last season was. Bad. Oh God, I'm just messing the whole thing up. But I think you know what I'm say. But anyways, Elias Pettersson, Rick Tocchet put together the lotto line again, which is Brock Besser, JT Miller, and Elias Pettersson, and they've been cooking. They've been going crazy, right? It's kind of a funny narrative here in Vancouver. It's like, oh, Tocchet, finds lightning in a bottle with putting these three players together. It's like, they've been playing together for 2 years. Like, this is just the first time that he put them together. You know what I mean? But
Yep.
it is what it is. Pettersson looks great out there. I mean, one thing that we don't see when we look at just the statistics and the metrics of these players is how talented offensively they are. And that is a minor gap in if we just look at metrics. Like, there is some value to look the eye test, like just seeing what these players are capable of. And Pettersson in particular, this guy is slick as hell. It's just ridiculous. And he's on one right now for sure, but it's that lotto line. Everybody's going crazy with their shooting percentage. Their on ice shooting percentage is nuts. Like, this is going to regress. He's on a 109-point pace. He got 102 points last season. So, I mean, I do think the shooting percentage is going to regress. He's up at 18.3% on the season, but the power play's rocking. Everything else is going well. I mean, Canucks are going to regress, but the question is how much. And I tend to think now that it's not going to be that much. They will regress. They won't cook the way they're doing right now, but it's not going to be that bad. So I don't know. Where are you at with Pettersson and the Canucks in general, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, the Canucks are solid. I don't know that they're like an upper echelon contender or anything
Yeah.
at this point. It is a little bit concerning to me that the shooting percentage is coming at even strength, so it's not like we can say like just the power play is really working and they found something new this year that's really working. That's not truly the case this year. I will say like 18.3%, this is a guy who routinely averages around 16 plus percent. So it's not like you're looking at a huge regression there. Maybe, he's on a 42 goal pace right now. Maybe you have him just a touch below 40 goals as a projection rest of season, but like, I mean, you're kind of splitting hairs there, really. What's more concerning to me is the 16.7% on ice shooting percentage. Last year was a career high for him at 14.0. So I think that one's definitely coming down. We've talked a lot on this podcast about how Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had the highest on ice shooting percentage of all time. I think it was like 15.8 or 15.9 last year. So definitely 16.7 is a little bit stratospheric and definitely will come down. So I'd still put rest of season pace, I'd put it on under 100 points for Pettersson, but I mean, that's a variance thing. He could easily be over that as well. So either way, you're talking about an absolutely elite fantasy option. And the shots have really come back in this last little stretch where he's got 7 goals, 12 points in his last 5 games. He's up to 51st in shots per 60, and that's what I was really hoping for. The scoring chances haven't exactly been there, but he's also the kind of player who doesn't, he's a sniper, right? Like, he takes shots from distance and can score in ways that other players can't. So giving him a little bit of grace on the scoring chances, being a little bit off of some of these other players. So overall, I think that, Pettersson's elite. I'm not going to take anything away from him. Is he running a little bit hot? Yes. But in the end, I don't know that anybody's making any major moves based on these percentages with Elias Pettersson, but we had to shout him out because 12 points in his last 5 games, absolutely nuts.
Nuts.
Let's keep moving on and talk about another Blake favorite. We know that Blake loves Blake Coleman, that is. Coleman's got 8 points, 4 goals in his last 5 games here, averaging over 19 minutes a night, which is really the biggest thing that's changed for Blake Coleman this season, is that he's getting a chance to just skate way more ice time. And what do you know, a guy who's always had solid underlying metrics. You give him a bunch more ice time, and suddenly those underlying metrics turn into a 36 goal, 70-point pace on the season so far. What do you think about what's been going on there in Calgary? Do you think Coleman's going to continue rest of season at this 19-minute a night pace? Like, should we expect 36 goal Blake Coleman from here on out?
No, I don't think so. But maybe the ice time sticks. But like they're doing well right now. The Flames are actually playing good hockey right now, and Blake Coleman's a big part of that, right? So I could see his ice time maintaining, but in terms of like this offensive output, how is this man doing this? It doesn't really make sense. Like he's on a 71-point pace right now. The highest pace he's ever had previously was a 46-point pace. So you can tell kind of just the difference in this season compared to previously. Like this guy's a 32-year-old man. And he's also cooking at 18.4%. Who does he think he is? Elias Pettersson? No. All right, Blake Coleman. His previous shooting percentage high was 11.5%, and he's cooking at 18.4%. And then in the last 5 games, 66.7%. All right. So obviously he's running hot. This is not sustainable in any capacity, but I've got him on 2 spots, and I just can't get rid of him because look at this. He's been doing this for so long. Like he's won me matchups. So I'm a big fan of this guy. Again, I do think the ice time is going to hold, but none of this other stuff is sustainable. I mean, rest of the season for me, Blake Coleman, I could see 55 points, 60, maybe. Oh God. I mean, if he's still cooking in this way, maybe 60 points, but obviously a very valuable member of this team. And he's doing the thing right now, and I'm here for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard, right? He's not on the top power play unit. That's where you would figure a lot of offense could come from. The line he's been on most recently, Mikhail Backlund, Andrew Mangiapane. That's none of the star players really there. It's more of the grinder line that they've played in the past. And so that part's not really changing. It's really just that he's getting more minutes. I mean, more minutes is definitely a pathway to more production, more fantasy points for us. But yeah, definitely like the IPP up over 80%. That's not going to sustain 18.3% shooting percentage. This is a guy who struggled to stay above 10% in the last couple of years. So that's definitely going to go away. You don't really see a corresponding uptick in the on ice underlying numbers here. And then the on ice shooting percentage would be the highest of his career as well at 11.7%. So definitely regression is coming for Blake Coleman, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to be fantasy rosterable and useful. Especially, yeah, if he can keep up 19 minutes a night, like pretty much anybody with Blake Coleman's metrics, like he's been a consistent, like around 9 shots per 60. His highest ever was 11.2. His lowest in the past like 7 years here is like 8.2. So he's been between all around that 9.5, somewhere in there over most of his career here as, you know, like a mature NHLer in the league. So yeah, 19 minutes a night with 9 shots per 60, that guy's going to be worth your while in fantasy more often than not. So I think Coleman's definitely going to be useful, but definitely we have to, you know, temper our expectations when it comes to 36 goal, 70-point Blake Coleman. Let's keep rolling and talk about Matthew Barzal. He's got a couple goals, 8 points in his last 5 years, getting over 20 minutes a night. The shots have been coming for Barzal this year, which is a distinct departure from his stylistic play of years past. He's 44th in shots per 60 over the last 5 games, 66th in shots per 60 on the season now, and pacing for 24 goals, 90 points. Talk to me about Barzal. I think at this point we have to assume, like on the season, he's his average time on ice is well over 19 minutes, so it does seem like that's kind of just status quo at this point. He's going to be used a lot more than he has been in years past. It does seem like he's got a renewed focus on shooting the puck more often, but he's not converting all that much. 9.5% shooting percentage. Do you think there's maybe even higher heights for Barzal here?
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. That's the way he's playing right now. Obviously, he's kind of coming into his own, and I think he's fully healthy. Like there's been some injury concerns that he's had throughout the seasons here, but he looks to me like he's good to go. This guy's always been an elite skater, and one thing I love is just all the assists and chances that he's generating off of the rush. Like that's something that Barzal does very well. Zone entries, things like that. And yeah, I mean, I love his deployment, right? This is going to be a big season for him. Like the last few games here, he's a couple games over 21 minutes. I love that. So I think the Islanders offensively, not the worst team in the world. It's defensively where they're really struggling, but I mean, that doesn't matter to Barzal. I'm a big fan of the player, and like you said, it's nice to see those shots on goal kind of coming up where they haven't been there historically.
For sure. Yeah, I think what's really interesting, you saw it as soon as Barry Trotz left town and Lane Lambert took over in the on ice numbers specifically for Barzal. He was, 62.7 Corsi 4 per 60. Then he went to 65.3. Those were the last 2 years of Trotz. Then Lambert comes in, he's up to 77.3 and 75.9 this year. So you see an immediate huge jump in the underlying numbers, corresponding jump there, and scoring chances 4 per 60 as well. This year, he's just being a little bit more efficient. He's got better finishing there with Bo Horvat playing with him at even strength and on the power play a lot more this year. That's obviously been a pairing that's worked out quite well. Honestly, like his IPP, 70.3%, that would be the lowest of his career. So, like, he could even factor into more of this theoretically. The shooting percentage is on the lower side, but he's been a pretty consistent, like around 10, 11% guy through most of his career. So I don't know how much of an uptick we should really expect in the shooting percentage area of things. Overall, like, I think this is probably, 90-point Barzal is kind of where I think he might end up the rest of the year. He might get a few more goals, like maybe 30 goals, 90 points is the rest of season pace that I might ascribe to Matthew Barzal, but definitely I can't be surprised by what he's putting on the ice right now. Let's kick it over to Seattle and talk a little bit about Eeli Tolvanen. He's got a couple goals and 7 points in his last 5 here, while averaging under 15 minutes a night in that span, which is pretty impressive stuff. The underlying numbers here are not terrific. 144th in shots per 60, 93rd in individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 62nd in Corsi 4 per 60, 71st in scoring chances 4 per 60. On the season now, it's just a 21 goal, 55-point pace, averaging a touch under 16 minutes a night on the season. What do we make of Tolvanen? I know we joke all the time about, Seattle and how everybody's even within the top 9. It's just minutes are completely evenly distributed, and we can't really ever pull any one player out of this. But Tolvanen has definitely come on as the season has progressed here. Do we think that there's potential for him to get to higher heights the rest of the season?
I think that it's going to rely on deployment, unfortunately, like based on everything you just said, like, yeah, for him to really pop for fantasy, we're going to need to see a few more minutes. I mean, this guy's averaging what, like 15, just under 16 minutes a game. That's not going to cut it for like an option that we're getting excited about, right? Obviously, under the hood, I think this guy's got what it takes to get going here. He's amazing in category leagues as well, like a big time beefer. So I like that, but yeah, he's still on power play too, and I just hate the deployment in Seattle. It's like I just can't get excited about it. So I never picked up Tolvanen anywhere because I always felt like there was someone I felt a little bit safer about. Like this is, to me, Tolvanen is kind of a risky pick a little bit just because of the deployment, right? But he's been rewarding those people who have taken a risk on Tolvanen, and like you could probably keep this guy in your lineup as long as Seattle has a reasonable schedule. Like there's no reason to drop this guy because he's putting points on the board, but last 5 games under 15 minutes a night. I don't like that. So I think I'm out on Tolvanen until I see a little bit more deployment, but I'm sure I'll stream him in here and there.
For sure. Yeah, I think I feel somewhat similarly. I think the IPP is a little bit high, 72% on the season, but by the same token, like just given the underlying metrics here and how solid they are, I think his shooting percentage at 12.6% and the on-ice shooting percentage at 10.8%, I think he could actually grow a little bit on both of those numbers, and so it might all wash out. Really, it does come down to the minutes rest of season. I think realistically, you're looking at a guy who you're going to have stretches where he has 7 points in 5 games, and you're going to have some other stretches where he has 0 points in 5 games or 1 point in 5 games. And yeah, there was a stretch like that. I dropped Tolvanen in Cacupful. He got picked up and immediately went on this little bender here and scored the 7 points. So you're welcome for that. But I think this is going to be just a case where you're really excited about him some weeks and you're really not excited about him other weeks. I don't really view him as much more than a streamer at this point. Definitely not somebody I'm attached to rest of season. A couple of Jonathans I want to talk about here. Jonathan Huberdeau, Jonathan Drouin. So Huberdeau's got 1 goal, 6 points in his last 5 here. Some people have been messaging me saying, is Huberdeau back here? Should we be buying back in on this? And then we also have Drouin here, who's also got 6 points, but 4 goals in his last 5 here. The stark difference that you'll see between these two, Huberdeau's averaging just over 17 minutes a night. Drouin has been averaging over 24 minutes a night over the
Crazy
last
stuff.
5 games here. Neither of these guys have terrific metrics, but actually Huberdeau's metrics, I would say, are slightly better overall, except for the on-ice metrics, where Drouin is obviously playing with McKinnon and Rantanen at even strength and on the power play, and those are obviously terrific underlying numbers. So if you have to pick a guy for next week, if you have to pick a guy for the rest of the season, Blake, who's it going to be? Huberdeau, Drouin?
Oh, that's like Sophie's choice. Yeah, it's. I mean, Huberdeau has obviously the past that we like to reference, right? It seems like forever ago. This guy's currently on a 44-point pace. Damn. All right. It's even worse than it was last year, people, but he has been cooking lately. 6 points in 5 games. That's nice. I don't know. If I knew Jonathan Drouin was going to continue to get this deployment, I'd go Drouin easy. Like, there's no question to me. Like you said, because the on-ice numbers, like just his access to those players and 24 minutes a night with access to those players, like, yeah, give me that all day long, right? Whereas Huberdeau, yeah, he's driving offense a little more, but he just doesn't look right out there to me. It's sometimes he can just go invisible, right? And I still am not sure that he has the coach's confidence there in Calgary. Like, things are going well, so that's fine. But I don't know. Drouin, when you get 24 minutes a night, you have the coach's confidence. That means like he's very happy with what you're doing and he's putting you out there in all situations. So in a bubble right now, I'm taking Drouin. It doesn't feel good, but that's where I'm at. And, fun fact, I have Drouin on 2 teams. I picked him up for this last week here, and I'll probably hold him into next week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think neither of these players are players that I'm considering rest of season holds, but
Yeah.
Drouin's the player who's got the better deployment at the moment. Maybe Lehkonen coming back does change that. There are some things that could change that, but then I would just drop him, and I wouldn't feel bad about it either way. I would not feel bad about dropping either of these players. I'm not super into Huberdeau at this point. Like, the underlying metrics have just literally never been there for the entire season. On the season, ranking 357th in shots per 60, 308th in individual scoring chances for per 60. That's atrocious. He's always been a pass first kind of guy, but even for a guy like that, like, that's just unfathomably bad. So I can't get excited about that. I do think, like, rest of season, Huberdeau's role is probably safer just because of
Yep.
the amount of money that they're paying him. But I'll take like one solid week of Drouin over anything happening from Huberdeau for the rest of the season, because I think both of these guys you're probably going to drop at some point. Blake's fist pumping here. Talk to me. What happened in the game?
Oh, the slinky Daniel Sprong scored, and the assist went to Alex DeBrincat, who I have
There
on
it
both
is.
teams that I need. Let's go. Oh, I mean, I'll calm down, but that's going to win me my couple matchup right there. The slinky. Just like I said, people, Daniel Sprong, he's a legend. All right, let's move on.
All right. So let's talk about some defensemen then. I want to talk for a second about Philip Hronek. Go back to Vancouver there. He's got a goal and 7 points in his last 5 games here. People were starting to get a little bit worried about Hronek. He went through a cold stretch there. Now he's back on a hot stretch and everything is forgiven. Not averaging the insane amounts of ice time that he was earlier in the season, just 21 and a quarter minutes on average the last 5 games here. Underlying metrics are like okay, 49th in shots per 60 amongst defensemen, and 57th in Corsi 4 per 60, 18th in scoring chances 4 per 60, so that's pretty solid. On pace now for 6 goals on the season, but 69 points, which is pretty nice. What do we make of Hronek right now, Blake? Tell me what you're seeing with him.
Well, first off, just the on the ice product. He's great. He's a perfect supplement to Quinn Hughes, and this guy is solid. I mean, when this trade was made last season, the Canucks fans weren't really like, it was weird, right? Because we thought we were going to go into like a rebuild situation. And then, of course, classic, Canucks management, we're going to retool. All right. So that's nice. But they picked this guy up and he didn't play very much at the end of last season, right? Because he was injured. So, that all said, this has been a great showing for Hronek. And I think he's overachieving, obviously, here, I think, with his points. But you got to be loving this. Like, was Hronek drafted? I don't even, like, I didn't draft him anywhere. I didn't see him drafted. So this guy's probably a waiver pickup. And we're looking at 69 points. Damn. So whatever, anything that Hronik does for fantasy, I'm loving. But that, he's a big part of why the team is doing so well. Canucks finally have a defenseman core that is solid and can, help keep the puck out of the net. So I think he's a more valuable player in real life than he is in fantasy, but everything he's doing now is just icing on the cake. I honestly think it's more likely that he gets like a 50 to 55 point kind of end to the season, right? 69 points makes no sense. If he gets 69 points, I mean, damn, that means that he just overachieved for the entire season in my estimation.
Yeah, I think definitely you see it there with the on-ice shooting percentage at 16% for Hronik. That's definitely going to come back down. I do think he's getting a little bit unlucky with the goals. He should have a few more goals here.
Got a
3.5%
bomb
shooting
too, a slap
percentage.
shot.
Yeah. So I think that comes back. Definitely the ice time being reduced here. It seems like the Canucks have been getting a little bit better play from their other defensemen aside from the top pair, and they've been a little bit more willing to let the other guys play. Definitely with the hot streak they've been on, they've probably been ahead and resting the top guys a little bit more than they might in closer games as well. So that probably plays into it a little bit of late. But overall, yeah, I think I'm in line with you. Probably 50, 55 points as a rest of season pace is where I'd land for this guy. Another guy who's been hot of late and I feel like has somehow flown under the radar despite playing in the self proclaimed center of the hockey universe in Toronto, Morgan Rielly. He's got 2 goals, 6 points in his last 5. That's before the game tonight, but he has an assist in the game tonight as well. And yeah, I think he's kind of doing the thing, right? Just under 24 minutes on average, over 24 minutes on average on the season. Last 5 games here, third amongst all defensemen in shots per 60, ninth in Corsi 4 per 60, 13th in scoring chances 4 per 60. On ice numbers are there. The shots on goal are there. He's doing pretty much everything. On pace for 12 goals, 68 points. And I'm kind of struggling to see where this is going to regress for Rielly. If he's got power play 1 locked down, where does this go wrong? I think Rielly might just be one of those guys who got drafted late and is turning into a legitimate star for your team.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of this player, especially after last year's playoffs. I know we've talked about that before, but to me, he was the clear best player, him and Willie Nylander, for the Leafs in their playoffs. This guy's a gamer, and I think maybe his value got sapped a little bit because of the Klingon being signed there in Toronto, right, to take over Power Play 1 for some unknown reason. When you got this 72-point beauty out there, he scored 20 goals before in the league. So that's another thing I really like about Morgan Rielly is he's done it before. This is an offensive defenseman, but he does so much more. I'm actually a really big fan of this player. He's shooting more. His shooting percentage is up a little bit. He's 6.1% after 3.2% last year. But I mean, we know he had kind of an off season. So yeah, I think this is absolutely sustainable. I think we're looking at 60 points at least for Morgan Rielly, especially with that power play deployment.
Yeah, I think it is looking pretty sustainable under the hood at this point. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if the shooting percentage does stick around at this elevated level. The individual scoring chances 4 per 60 on the season, the highest of his career. That's looking good. And he's providing value in other ways. He's got the highest shot blocking rate of his career by a solid margin. Like
Love that.
last few seasons here, 2.8, 2.5, 3.5, and this year 4.9 blocks per 60. So he's really kicked that up a notch this year. Obviously now on the top power play and pretty entrenched. I don't think Liljegren's going to take that outside of injury from him. So I think that, Rielly's looking even more like a stud that you got late in your drafts this year. All right, we got to keep this moving, but before we do, we have to let you know about the Apples and Ginos Discord server. Over 1,000 fantasy hockey managers in there talking fantasy hockey and just general hockey every single day. Get your buns and your biscuits in there and come join us, all right? How's that impression, Blake? Did that feel good?
Damn Skippy. It was spot on, buddy. I thought I was, listening to myself on recorded. So there you go.
Perfect. If you need even a little more help than what the general community can provide, you can check out the Apples and Ginos Patreon. I'm offering show notes from all these shows, as well as I guarantee answers to all your questions in the patron-only channels on the Discord server. So check that out if you need some additional help. I've been doing some team reviews as well. That's the $10 tier on on the Patreon. I've been doing some of those for some people, and they've been letting me know how much that's really helping them out this year. So that always feels good. So if you need something like that, make sure you check out the Apples and Ginos Patreon. All these links will be in the show description for you to check out. And lastly, make sure that you're checking out Mark Barber. He's 18 Skaters on Twitter. He's posting these daily summaries on the Apples and Ginos website every single day. Gives you just a brief rundown of all the games from yesterday, all the notable performances, what you need to be tracking for fantasy hockey purposes. It's a great way to start the day and just get caught up if you didn't have a chance to catch any of the games or be checking your phone all night the way many of us are. So definitely check that out. It's a great way to start your day and keep abreast of what's happening in the league.
Oh my.
All right, Blake, are you ready for some have-nots?
What a wordsmith. Oh my God. You paint a vivid picture, Nate, and that's what I love about you. All right.
All right. Well, let's get into some have-nots. Now, maybe this guy's not a have-not after notching another
No
assist
way.
today.
Take his name off the list immediately.
All right, but Alex DeBrincat, we have to say, has not been cooking of late. Just one assist in his last 5 games before tonight. And the underlying numbers have not been good either. 209th in shots per 60, 155th in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 146 in Corsi, 4 per 60, 156 in scoring chances, 4 per 60. On the season, pacing for 33 goals, 76 points, averaging over 18 minutes a night pretty consistently, both in the last 5 games and on the season. So what are we thinking about DeBrincat here, Blake? It feels like we've had him in both the hot shots and the have-nots multiple times this season. So where are we standing on DeBrincat rest of season?
Yeah, I mean, I had to break it in probably 4 or 5 spots this year, and I traded him in 3 spots, 2 straight up for Alex Ovechkin. So I don't know, jury's still out on that one, but it's as the season's worn on, I've been less and less sort of enthused about DeBrincat. I think he's on a 74-point pace, which actually feels right to me for DeBrincat at this point. I think I projected him for 84 or something like that. So I think he's underachieving, what I thought he might do. But yeah, ever since Kane has got there too, like that's a good thing. That's obviously good for DeBrincat, but his ice time is all over the shop. Like, he's got one game where he plays 22 minutes, then the next game he plays 15:48, then he's up at 17:20, then he's at 19:12. Like, you kind of don't know. I feel like they're still trying to figure out how to utilize DeBrincat, and he's not on the top line, which I consider Dylan Larkin to be the top line there. So they've got DeBrincat on line 2 with Kane and JT Compher probably. I think that's what they're rolling, which is great. But I don't know. I want the top dog, and that's what I thought that DeBrincat would be when he went to Detroit, and he was, especially at the beginning of the season when they were redlining and everything, right? They were basically the Canucks for the first, couple weeks of the season, first month of the season, and then everything kind of fell off, right? But I mean, I think expect 70-point DeBrincat moving forward, and you're not going to be disappointed. And I think, he has room to grow on that, right? But if we look at some of his statistics, the metrics they aren't really there, are they, Nate?
Yeah, it's a little bit tough. I feel like DeBrincat is one of these guys who gets extremely hot and extremely cold throughout the season, and so I want to be a little bit cautious about, swinging too wildly in my perception of him one way or the other throughout the season. I do think when all is said and done, like if you look at his season-long numbers here, 67% IPP, 13.2% shooting percentage, 11.7% on-ice shooting percentage. Those numbers don't seem that far off to me. I think, if anything, you could get a little bit better on the shooting percentage, maybe a touch higher on the IPP, and maybe you're looking at just right at that point per game level again, 35 goal, 82 points pace. Like somewhere around there feels all right. Definitely, it doesn't feel great that his underlying metrics have been bad the last 5 games here. But again, I'm just choosing to not be too overly worried about someone unless I have a much bigger reason to be so. And DeBrincat is in that caliber of player for me. And just because we've seen it before where he has gone on extended cold streaks and extended hot streaks, I think it's just a little bit of a unique player in that regard. And so we have to just kind of take the good with the bad and recognize that when everything's tallied up at the end of the season, you're going to be happy with what you got from him. All right, let's move over. We were talking about Patrick Kane. Let's talk about Evander. Let's take a gander at Evander, shall we?
Yeah, we got to take a gander immediately.
All right. Well, Kane has been the one player left out of this massive winning streak that Edmonton has been on. He's been banished down the lineup. until this last game. So he got back up on the Draisaitl Fogel line, and anytime you can get some exposure to Warren McLovin Fogel, you have to be loving life. So if that sticks like through the roof for Evander Kane, he's going to be crushing a 100-point pace rest of season. Obviously, I think we can agree on this, can we not, Blake?
There's no question, and we're not even being sarcastic. All right, book it.
All right. Well, just to dig into the metrics a little bit here. So he hasn't been getting a ton of minutes, 15.4 minutes average time on ice the last 5 games, 101st in shots per 60, 98th in individual scoring chances for per 60, kind of just okay, 132nd in Corsi for per 60, 79th in scoring chances for per 60. Considering that most of those games were played down the lineup with the somewhat laughable, I would say, bottom six that Edmonton has assembled behind their stars, I really don't fault him for any of that, to be honest. On the season, like pacing for 30 goals, 54 points, averaging about 17 and a half minutes on the season, 78% IPP, 12.3% shooting percentage, 8.5% on ice shooting percentage. Like the IPP does feel a little bit high, but the on ice shooting percentage is definitely low. I feel like this is just who Kane is. Like 30 goals, 55, 60 points. He's going to be in that range. He's going to shoot a ton. He's going to hit a ton. He's going to do all those things for you. And we definitely, it was tough to stomach when they were going through this and Kane was just stuck there on the third line. And obviously it was going to be really hard for him to produce from that position. But he's pretty clearly, to me, one of their top 6 most talented forwards in my mind. And so it felt like only a matter of time to me before he did get back up into this position. And I'm hopeful and anticipating that that will continue. I mean, it was against Montreal, so take it with a grain of salt. But in that game with Kane, with Draisaitl and Fogel, he had that line had 12 shots and only 3 against, 20 shot attempts and only 6 shot attempts against. Like they absolutely crushed. So I feel like that should continue. Coaching decisions are never linear and never truly predictable, but I'm feeling much better about Evander Kane after that one game. And just in general, like I was never all that worried. It sucked, but I was never like truly worried that this was going to be the end of the road for Kane. How are you feeling, Blake?
Yeah, I would echo all of that. It has been a concerning season for Kane. Like it hasn't gone the way that I thought. Like this is a guy that we usually love the metrics, right? He's usually right up there in shots on goal per 60 on the season, and he's doing well this year, no question. But he's not doing what he did last season. And I just really thought that everything would sort of the runway would be clear for Kane to really produce, like all this off ice stuff that was going on. Like there was nothing going into this season, right? He's locked into the top 6, and then like you said, coach decision. He's putting him down to the third line, the spare parts. So yeah, I feel much better with him on that second line with Draisaitl. It makes absolute sense. So I'm hoping that continues, right? But this guy's such a beefer, man. Like I'm such a fan of Evander Kane. I think I called for him. He's like a 30 and 30 guy. I think I projected him for 65. I think that's still in the wheelhouse, but he's going to need some help. He's going to need that deployment. And I do think that this is a guy that should get on power play 1 if any one of those guys pops off. Like, or if they're injured, or like, I still think Evander Kane is like an elite stash, but who knows, right? You got McLovin out here popping off for 5 points in a game. I mean, I don't know. Like what they're doing at Edmonton is working. So I don't think there's going to be major changes, but a really good change is getting this guy out with Draisaitl. That makes absolute sense. And it's going to increase his ceiling.
For sure. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Nick Suzuki. Just 1 assist in his last 5 games, still getting all the deployment and then some, over 22 minutes a night on the season, over 21 minutes. So it's not just been this last little bit. 328th in shots per 60, 294th in individual scoring chances for per 60, in the 190s for Corsi 4 and scoring chances for per 60. So none of the underlying metrics looking solid. On pace for 23 goals, 68 points. Do you take the over or under on those paces rest of season, Blake?
60. You know what? I'll take the dead on. I think I'll just take it for even. Like I'll call that. It's like roulette. You call one number. That's what I'm doing with Nick Suzuki. And it's funny. I feel like we haven't been, banging on Nick Suzuki this season. Giggity. Usually that's what we did last year. We talked a bunch of yang on Nick Suzuki. His that's people true. Called our people. They basically asked for a cease and desist. I mean, Nate's entangled in a legal battle, but shout out to Nick Suzuki. But it's he's doing what he does, right? And he's doing it with a shooting percentage that is almost 4% less than he did last year. So, I mean, maybe there's a little headroom there, but I see 65 points for Nick Suzuki in the future. I love the deployment. I think he's a valuable player in fantasy, but hopefully you got him at extreme value, because this guy is not someone you should be targeting. He's just a nice piece that's out there that is going to run into some points by being on the ice, right? And Cole Caulfield's been underachieving big time as well. So, if Cole Caulfield could get his game going, we could maybe see a little bit more from Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that realistically, there's not much more ceiling here for Suzuki, at least in this iteration of the Montreal Canadiens. 73% IPP, 12.4% shooting percentage, 10% on ice shooting percentage. If Caulfield was absolutely rolling and they had like a legit scorer on the other side, Slavkovsky, I'm not going to write the kid off. He's is definitely still just a kid. We've
So
seen
young.
like Byfield, Lafreniere, we've seen some of these guys take steps later in their careers. So maybe Slavkovsky has some of that career arc to him yet. I'm definitely not going to write him off or laugh at the Canadians for that pick just yet. But definitely he's not there yet. So in my mind, they're still a couple of wingers short for Suzuki to really have some more offensive pop for us. And so he's really just kind of like in this space where he's probably better than most of the options out there on the waiver wire in your league, but he's definitely not providing you with a ton of value over replacement. And I just kind of think that's what we have to expect from Suzuki moving forward. Another player that a lot of people have been asking about all season long, just one assist in the last 5 games for John Gaudreau, averaging touch under 19 minutes in this last stretch. Underlying metrics remain bad for Gaudreau. 245th in shots per 60, 282nd in individual scoring chances, 4 per 60, 97th in Corsi, 4 per 60, not terrible. 158th in scoring chances, 4 per 60 on the season, pacing for 13 goals, 50 points. We've talked about him many times, Blake, but do you have hope for Gaudreau? Are you still hanging on to him anywhere? Like a couple 14-team league, are you letting go of Gaudreau there?
Oof. No. I think I would hold Gaudreau in a 14-team league. But this is ugly, right? Like it's not a must hold in a 14-team league. It's a soft hold. But yeah, I think because of the offensive ceiling that Gaudreau has, we have to respect that. But this guy's on a 50-point pace, and his metrics are in the toilet. Nothing is going right. Like, bring Boone Jenner back. God, like Boone Jenner, please get back in the lineup so anybody can start popping off. Like, and actually, shout out to Boone Jenner. It sounds like he's skating with the team, so that guy could be back, in the next month, next couple of weeks here. So that's kind of good news. But in terms of Gaudreau, it's just I need to see something. I need to see something, anything. And what Pascal Vincent is doing in Columbus is tragic. Like, he's just throwing the lines in a blender. He had that Russian line for a little bit that I thought looked really good, Marchenko, Voronkov, and Chinikov. And then, blow that up. Now we got Gaudreau with Cole Sillinger, who got a random hat trick out of nowhere, and Igor Chinikov. Like, I don't know. There's no consistency there in Columbus, and I feel like they're kind of just playing the season out, like playing for a draft pick at this point. So I don't know. Rest of the season, I could see Johnny Gaudreau kind of bumping up and maybe getting 60 points, 65 points, but I don't know. It just doesn't look good, does it, Nate?
No, it doesn't. I'm content dropping Gaudreau, even in Kakufel.
Oh no.
It's a 2-game week for Columbus this week.
Yeah.
Like, this is a pretty solid jumping off point if you just want to be rid of the headache. I never rate players off. Like, I'm always one, like, the metrics tell me what I'm doing with a player, good or bad. And so if the metrics did come back up, if he did start to score some goals again, Jenner, Line come back, Werenski comes back, everything comes back, then sure, I could be in on Gaudreau again later in the season. I'm not writing him off completely, never will. But at this moment, like, I think you're sleeping if you're keeping Gaudreau on your team in almost every spot. There's probably a deep league somewhere that somebody will pull up and say, I'm not dropping him here. What are you talking about? And sure, okay. In your specific league, maybe, but in the vast majority of leagues, I think Johnny Gaudreau is a drop at this point. Another couple players that could be drops in the right leagues or the wrong leagues, as it may be, is both Ottawa power play 2 defensemen here, Jake Sanderson, Jacob Chychrun. I've talked about Chychrun and my love for Chychrun, but neither of these guys are putting up much in the way of points at this point. Sanderson has 0 points his last 5 games. Chychrun has just the 1 assist. Sanderson averaging a touch over 22 minutes a night, and Chychrun a touch over 21. What do we make of what's going on here? Shabbat has gone right back to power play one for all the good it's really done him, I guess. But things are not great. So Sanderson on season now, 11 goal, 43-point pace. Chikrin, 15 goal, 56-point pace. That's definitely better. What are we doing with these two moving forward? Would you consider dropping either of these?
Yep, I'd consider dropping Sanderson for sure. He's not a must hold to me in any capacity. Like, yeah, he kind of had his situation, his day in the sun at the beginning of the season there when he was cooking on power play one and really producing, but that never looked to me like something that was going to be sustainable. I know a lot of people got excited. We went out and added Jake Sanderson right away, and he's a viable fantasy option for sure. Like he's on a 43-point pace. He's really good at blocking, right? So any league that has that scoring, like you're going to get some value from Sandy. But I don't know. I'm just not excited about the player. He's getting a ton of minutes and he's doing nothing with it. Whereas Chikrin, yeah, I'm holding in all spots with Jacob Chikrin. I think there's a chance that he gets moved at the deadline here. And I'm hoping that if that does happen, he slides into a power play one spot somewhere because this man should be on power play one. I still don't quite get this, Shabbat on power play one. It doesn't make sense. Like, is it tenure that he's just been with the team for so long? Like, this is a new coach too. So I don't know. Obviously, like they're head coaches, and I'm again just some guy in my basement. So, but to me, Chikrin should be on power play one. But again, I know you're going to talk about his metrics. Like things are looking good under the hood with this guy. Like we gotta take note of that. And I think he's got a lot more to give. So Chikrin, I'm holding. Sanderson, I have no problem getting off.
Yeah, I think I'm right in line with that. The underlying metrics for Chikrin, even in this stretch where he's not putting up points, have been borderline elite. 22nd in shots per 60, third in shot attempts per 60, and sixth in on ice Corsi 4 per 60, 47th in scoring chances 4 per 60. So I think really the lack of points the last little bit has been more a product of Ottawa scuffling more than Chikrin himself personally. For Sanderson, he's never really been like an individual producer. He's got that 11 goal pace on the season, but it does feel like that's been a little bit unsustainable with the kind of shot producer that he is, or I should say isn't, I guess.
Mhm.
92nd in shots per 60, 143rd in individual scoring chances 4 per 60, 26th in Corsi 4 per 60, but 109th in on ice scoring chances 4 per 60 over the last 5 games. And then on the season, like it's the same story. Chikrin is absolutely crushing Sanderson across the board in all metrics, despite the fact that Sanderson is the one who got power play one for basically all of that time while Shabbat was out. So yeah, between the two, it's clearly Chikrin to me. I'm not dropping Chikrin anytime soon. I do think you can drop Sanderson at this point if you need that spot in your lineup. All right, Blake, let's move on. Let's talk about a player who is performing well under the hood. And this is a player we talked a little bit about before, but Yegor Sharangovich, last 10 games, sure, I'll give a quick rundown. 19 minutes, 14 seconds average time on ice. He's been 63rd in shots per 60 in that span, but 9th in individual scoring chances 4 per 60. 80th in Corsi 4 per 60, 45th in scoring chances 4 per 60. So the on ice numbers are solid, but really it's that individual scoring chances 4 per 60 number that's been elite for Sharangovich in this last stretch. Now, of course, he's coming off a game on Saturday where he didn't register a shot on goal, so this is probably the absolute perfect time to talk about it. And maybe this is a sign that he's just gonna, morph back into the player that he was for the Devils all those years. But I think there's really something here with Sharangovich. At least he's shown us that he can get into these hot spurts and produce when given the opportunity, at the very least. And there could be something really here where we're talking about a player who's experiencing a real breakout and is a longer term hold. I mentioned him a lot in the waiver wire episode as a player that I would consider a good long term, like rest of season hold potential. And I think this is why I think the individual scoring chances 4 per 60 number, it's just a really hard metric to sustain for any length of time at a high level. And he's been able to do that. He's been able to, yeah, win and hold top line, top power play kind of deployment there in Calgary. You might say it might be easier to do that in Calgary than a lot of other spots. So take that for what it's worth, but I won't hold it against him. I think that he's shown us a really special stretch here, and not a stretch that even a lot of players who do get hot for a while, they don't have the underlying metrics that really back it up the way that Sharangovich has here. So I'm pretty interested in Sharangovich rest of season. I really typically don't pick up players that don't have good schedules, but I kind of broke that rule for Sharangovich not that long ago. in a league, and I did pick him up because I do think that there's potential here that this could just be a player who's a real difference maker rest of season. What do you think, Blake? Any thoughts on Sharon Govich?
Hashtag hot spurts. All right. I like that. That's your words, not mine, Nate. All right. That's fine. But yeah, no, I'm stoked on the player. I think he should be in for a career year here. He's pacing for 57 points and he's starting to be prioritized, right? And you said all the underlying metrics are looking good. His shooting percentage is a little high, but yeah, I love the power play deployment as well. He's cooking on power play one, and one thing I like to look at is when a player's on a hot streak, the team's also on a hot streak. So it's like that those two things kind of look good together, right? So he's a big part of that winning. So they want to keep that winning going. So I think his role is a little bit more secure and it gives him a little bit of leash moving forward. Like if he does have a stretch where he's not playing well, they'll look back at this and be like, yeah, I know we can plug this player in here and he can get the biz. So that said, yeah, I think this player is really good. I like what you mentioned about picking up a player that doesn't have a good schedule for a rest of season hold. I did something like that similarly to not with Sharon Govich, but we'll talk about it in the next section. But yeah, I think that's a really viable strategy when you get a player that you're excited about that's all of a sudden getting opportunity deployment and has the good underlying metrics. Like you gotta go get them, unfortunately. So there you go.
Fair enough. All right, Blake, take us in to move of the week.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, kind of in the same vein. This week it didn't really work out for me, but I jumped on Pavel Mintyukov, the fresh maker, as soon as the Jamie Drysdale trade went through. I went out, looked to see if Mintyukov was available in my deeper leagues, right? Because it certainly was far from a sure thing that Mintyukov would go back on the power play one there in Anaheim. But yeah, I picked him up. It didn't work out because he got injured, obviously, in the first game, minus Drysdale. But I guess the reason I brought this up is kind of to your point. Like, don't be afraid to take a risk and be first on a player that has a decent upside. And those three things that I mentioned, deployment, metrics, and opportunity, right? My thoughts were that, we could get Mintyukov from the first third of the season, power play one quarterback off the waiver wire halfway through the season, right? And as we've mentioned here as well, Nate's said this lots, and I agree with it, is that defensemen get pretty thin on the waiver wire, right? And that's why in draft season, I think it is a viable strategy to pick up defensemen early on, right? Get these elite defensemen so you don't have to worry about it, right? Because you're scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to get some defensemen on the waiver wire when there's other good waiver wire targets there. So anyways, this didn't work out for me, but I am going to win both those matchups where I picked up Minty. So damn, but shout out to the Slinky. I'm still buzzing from Daniel Sprong. That man is a freaking unit, but there you go. I thought it was worth the risk. So that's my 2 cents.
Nice. Yeah, so for my move of the week, I just wanted to I was struggling to find a place. I wanted to talk about this because I think people really just don't understand how I'm playing the zero G strategy in season. I talk about it as much as I possibly can, but I want to carve out some space to do it again. And so I just want to recap across my 4 leagues where I'm playing, where my goalies are at now, and kind of where I started on the season. So I have the Patron League, which is a Cats league. And my goalies there are Vasilevsky, Georgiev, and Markstrom. This is
Oh
not
my
typical for
God.
me, but in the Patron League, it's one of those situations, right? Everybody's in that league and they've listened to the podcast a lot. If they're patrons of Apples and Geons, they're going 0G. And so the goalies just get pushed down a crazy amount. I took Georgiev in the 10th round, pick 118. You won't find that in any other league. So it's definitely a unique situation. I don't think there's much to learn from that, but that's just one of my leagues. The Experts League, Keep 3 League that we have that you're in as well, Blake. I have Stuart Skinner and Bennington there as well. And then I have Joseph Wall and Pyotr Kochetkov on the IR currently. So again, it's just a spot. That league in particular, there's not a lot of weight on goalies, and so I've really deprioritized goalies. But I did grab Skinner when the Edmonton debacle was happening and everybody was off. And obviously, he's been getting the majority of the starts and getting some wins there as Edmonton started to get hot. So, been happy with that one. Bennington has just been volume, and he's actually been surprisingly good, especially the last little while. So, pretty okay with that. And then, yeah, Wall and Kochetkov, classic 0G kind of plays there. The first goalie that I took in that league was Devin Levi in the 15th round, pick 188. So, again, not spending any draft capital whatsoever. Dropped him 2 weeks into the season, I think, as soon as he had that rough start. In the Fantasy Puck Content Creators League, right now I've got Marc-Andre Fleury and Joey Decord. Fleury I just picked up while Gustafson was out. He's probably going to get dropped with my first, my 3 a.m. play here this evening or tomorrow morning,
Don't
as the
give out
case
your
may be.
strategies, Nate. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess
Well,
this comes out
nobody's going to
tomorrow.
hear
You're
it.
fine. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
fine.
nobody's going to hear it till after it's happened anyway. So, yeah, the first goalie I took there was Philip Grubauer in the 14th round, pick 167. And yeah, I'm kind of loving life with the cord and then kind of streaming around that to find players throughout. And yeah, really not too worried about it either way there. In Cupful, and this one I left for the end because I think it's the most interesting scenario. A lot of people talk to me about how they can't play 0G in a 14 team league or they can't play 0G in a 16 team league. I think that's just inherently false. This is a 14 team league with pretty elite competition. Like I played in tier 3 last year, but I do think that the competition this year in this tier 3 division is better than it was last year, to be quite honest. And I've got Connor Ingram and Joey Decord. I'm absolutely loving life at the moment. And, you know, I'm probably going to move off of one or both of them by the end of the season. And I'm really not worried about it. I'm not married to these guys. I picked them up for free off the waiver wire. They're absolutely crushing right now. So I'm loving it. When they stop crushing, I'm going to move off of them. And I really don't care. I'm not attached. And that's what I think most people are not really understanding. The first goalie I took there was again Grubauer, pick 195, not spending any draft capital whatsoever on goalies. So yeah, really just the bullet points to consider from all of this. Didn't spend draft capital, absolutely refused to take a goalie above where he might return value. Georgiev in the 10th round, I think that's just an upside play at that point. We knew he was going to get a ton of volume in Colorado. So, and even he hasn't been great this season, right? Like, it's debatable whether he's even been worth a 10th round pick to this point. He's been getting volume, but that's pretty much been it for most of the season. The rate stats have not been great there. Really, I've paid attention to the waiver wire, but I'm still only taking goalies who help me for that specific week. Like I'm not, we talked about grabbing Sharon Govich in a week where he's not really going to help me schedule wise. I'm not doing that for goalies. So anywhere where I picked up even like Ingram or Decord, I've only picked them up in weeks where I'm like, yeah, I'm getting at least 2 starts out of this guy. I've not really gone out of my way to pick up a guy just because I needed to have a goalie. I do not feel that kind of way about goaltenders in any situation. And then really when it comes to picking which goalie to pick up, I'm really just picking them for team situation and upside. Like what's the best case scenario in this team situation that this player finds them in? Nothing else. There's no preconception of goalie skill. I'm not like thinking, oh, this guy is good because he had a 920 last year. That is not entering my process whatsoever. It's situation, it's upside. If everything goes right for that player, that's all I'm looking at when it comes to these players. So I just wanted to get that out there, talk a little bit about my strategy and how far it's gotten me. I think, yeah, you can look across my leagues. I think a lot of people would be pretty happy with my goaltender situation at this point in the league, in their leagues, and I didn't have to spend anything to do it. So that's what I wanted to get out there. You have any thoughts on that, Blake, before we wrap things up?
Only that to me, 0G is like a fantasy hockey hack, right? Like it's a hack. It's hard to do, but once you do it, it makes absolute sense based on everything you just said. So this is my first year doing 0G all the way through, and I could probably rattle mine off and they'll look very similar to yours, right? And goalies have not been a problem for me this year, except in my 16 team league. I am taking that as a bit of an insult there, Nate. You were throwing some, I was catching some strays over here on my 16 teamer where I did 0G, but that's fine.
All right. Well, one thing we do have to do, Blake, before we head out of here is
Wrap
we
it up.
do have to recap the head-to-head streamer deathmatch because once again, your boy is taking a W here. Tyler Sagan, 21.75 cacuffle points this week versus Alexis Lafreniere, who got up to 20 with a goal today and 5 shots, but fell just short in the end. Both of these are like, we should be pretty happy with how this turned out in terms of picking these players, but definitely happy to take home another W. You're still up on the season, but it is 7-6, Blake. Things are getting tight this week, as you know, if you did tune in for the waiver wire episode. We've got my Dawson Mercer versus Blake going back to the wall with Alexis Lafreniere, so we'll see how that goes. Anything to say for yourself here, Blake?
Just, you know what? It's a great job. I'm going to give you a virtual pat on the bum and a good game. All right. That's how we do. All right. That's because that's totally acceptable for us in this situation. Right, Nate?
Totally acceptable. A
All
virtual
right.
pat on the bum, I'll accept anytime. I
All
don't
right.
know
That's
how we
nice.
got here, but this is where we're at after an
Well,
hour of
let's not rule
recording.
anything out. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Before we go, I do want to say if you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe. That would really help us out. If you're listening on podcasts, leave us a rating or review. That helps us out as well. I do want to take a second and read some of the reviews that have come in recently. We really appreciate these, and I try to read out every single one on the podcast here because we do appreciate them so much. Party at the Moon Tower says, best in the biz, book it. Nate and Blake are crushing this thing. Let's be honest, the fantasy hockey podcast landscape was slightly lacking, and these two came in with what is almost overnight the best podcast out there. Regular content, concise and useful info, and hilarious digressions. Fellas, thank you for your service. Now that's a review, folks. Love that one there. Then we have this one from Just Heather 1230. Insightful and entertaining. The team at Apples and Genos delivers solid content with insightful analysis that caters to both seasoned fantasy hockey managers and beginners, diving deep into player performances, trends, and strategic moves, offering actionable advice for the fantasy community. Their comedic humor and occasional improv segments create an entertaining listening experience. Start the day with your morning coffee and creamer. Love
Oh, I
that.
see what you did there. Thank you, Just Heather.
All right. And lastly, here, B. McIntyre 29, my go to show for fantasy hockey. I've done fantasy hockey for a few years now, but only started listening to this pod this season. It's by far my favorite show to listen to. I really like the guests they have on, and the dynamic between Nate and Blake is awesome. We know this, making it really easy to listen to. Keep up the great work, guys. Thank you for your reviews. We do appreciate them. Yeah, can't say enough about the Apples and Genos community as a whole and all the kind words there and that we get from other corners as well. So thank you to everybody. But that's going to be all we've got for this episode. Hopefully it brought you some value, helps you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. All the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying the music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.